The fate of the aristocracy. They were the best, and aristocracy means rule of the best in ancient Greek. But having an idle aristocracy was only going to lead to a decline in the quality of this ruling class, and it was also going to make them weak if they could not fight in any conflicts and actually be aristocrats like their ancestors were. A large part of what made them who they were was not just that they were better mannered and had a superior culture to the commoners, but that they were also a class of warriors. Being a warrior class has a dual effect on a people. Firstly, it made them more physically strong. Second, it made them psychopathic, at least to a degree. Thirdly, it made them good at something, which is important, as every elite must be trained at something which they can use to sharpen themselves and perfect themselves for rule. This meant that they were skilled at something which made them an elite. It also meant that they were able to rule because they had a skill which was useful for ruling. In this case, military craft. This is important as every government in history needs an enforcement class if it wishes to maintain its rule and stop crime, native usurpers, or foreign conquerors. It is important for aristocracies to be able to have something that they are good at. It is not enough to just be better than everyone. You have to be better at something in particular, whether that thing be war, religion, trade, craftsmanship, or in contemporary times, tech. They must have something which you can point to, which you can say makes them elite, and they must have something which they themselves can point to about themselves, which they can say makes them elite. Another major problem that led to the downfall of the aristocracy is that it became severely inbred over time, and this was because they would only breed with other nobles. This was an issue because it meant that they would only breed within a small gene pool, since the aristocracy was almost by definition a small gene pool. In the early Middle Ages, this didn't matter so much, but as the centuries wore on, and the same families all over Europe were having babies with the same distant cousins over and over again, it meant that their genes became stale. Their genes became corrupted, and as a consequence, became more and more riddled with genetic problems, such as the Habsburg chin, or the hemophilia of Tsar Nicholas's son Alexei. This inbreeding has also led to more mental illnesses amongst the aristocracy than among the commoners. An example of this can be seen in Tsar Ivan the Terrible, who went insane and killed his son Tsarevich Ivan Ivanovich in a fit of madness. This was most likely caused by the effects of inbreeding in the royal gene pool. The aristocracy could have saved themselves from this if they had instead made their blood more diverse by incorporating some talented commoners into their bloodline, which is something that would have been much easier to do with the onset of modernity. They should have taken advantage of the coming of modernity, with its new class of millions of educated and talented commoners who could have easily entered the aristocracy. But alas, they did not, because the aristocracy still believed that their blood was superior and worth conserving, but this was a mistake. Clearly, it would have been better for them if they had incorporated new blood into their fold, and if they had, then maybe they would have been more adaptable and smarter in how they ruled, and maybe they would have even kept their power and privileges intact. I believe this inbreeding is what in large part led to the fall of the aristocracy, not just in terms of their decaying gene pool, but also in terms of what led to the loss of their political power and cultural influence. It's now worth talking about the fate of the aristocracy in modern warfare, because while in ancient times it was normal for nobles to fight and die in combat, this tendency has been much more disastrous for them in more recent generations. Earlier, we explored how much of the aristocracy in early modernity became idle. This was especially true in a place like France, but in spite of this, they still managed to have more grace and charm, and created and maintained a superior culture to what was created during and after the French Revolution and the rise of the communist Jacobin powers. But the truth is that many aristocrats in many countries still had a tradition of military service, and because of this, it meant that when modern wars came about, they simply kept fighting every time a new war was started between nation-states. This was not good because the ancient wars were about aristocratic power and the modern wars have all been about nation-states and their power and influence. War has not been to the benefit of an elite warrior class, but instead has been fought on behalf of nation-states, and unlike the ancient world, it has not brought greatness, power, and wealth to the winners, but instead has brought ruination to the nation-states who start these wars, and has also brought about the near extinction of the aristocratic families who traditionally fought in those wars historically. In other words, the new wars, the modern wars, have been much bloodier than the ancient wars were. And by this, I mean that the amount of young men that die in modern wars is of a much higher percentage than those who died in ancient wars. And because of this, it meant that wars, which had always been the bread and butter of aristocrats going back millennia, now became one of the main contributing factors for why the aristocracy went into a decline. But not just the aristocracy. Even young, strong, talented commoners were now in danger of this dangerous consequence of the development of modern warfare. This started to become apparent during early modern times with the Napoleonic Wars, but escalated greatly with the Crimean War, which was a bloodbath, and then in the American Civil War, which included many landed aristocrats from the South being killed, and then the biggest killers of aristocracy, which were the World Wars of the 20th century. So how did this happen? It is important to understand that it is modern warfare which killed thousands of men of aristocratic descent in the 20th century, and has led to an even further decline in this group of people in both their numbers as well as their ability to do what had always been their choice of occupation. The thing that gave them meaning and made them feel heroic and powerful, and had frankly made them elites in the first place. But now, war made them irrelevant. They were no longer necessary in warfare, and if they so chose to fight, it would likely mean the end of their house line. Aristocrats were shaped by war, had used war for centuries, and now, finally, war had moved past them. War was not theirs anymore. It was the occupation of nation-states now. Nation-states and their hordes of millions brainwashed into being good little patriotic soldiers. And if not that, then it was full of draftees. And now no aristocrat still here today, in the 21st century, would ever even think of going back to the battlefield. And if they did, they would soon think twice about it because they know it would be a bad idea. They are no longer a war-fighting class. They are now an idle aristocracy at best, and a business class at worst. No different from the bourgeoisie they once looked down on as inferior and nouveau riche and not true elites. They now have become them. If an aristocratic house still has money, it is usually because he and his family have become good businessmen now, and not from being great warriors or anything of the sort. That is just too old-fashioned. In addition to this, many descendants of aristocrats today are now of moderate wealth, or in some cases they are even impoverished. This alone should tell us that it truly is not their world anymore. This is probably why most of them don't even desire fame or attention anymore. They just lie low now, which is strange for a group of people who once had power, and therefore fame which went with it. Which is strange for a group of people who once had power, and therefore fame which went with it, as it usually does. It is also strange because in ancient times, aristocratic warriors intentionally looked for fame. It was seen as something desirable to be gained from being a great warrior. This is no longer the case now, as they largely don't want the fame anymore. Even commoners who are great soldiers don't even desire fame, as it is not something to be proud of in modern society that you are successful in warfare, since the reputation of warfare is not as glorified as it used to be. And in addition to this, those who are great soldiers are often scared of being famous for security reasons. Often what they did in wars kept secret for their own safety, so as they don't get targeted by their nation's enemies. Also, soldiers are expected not to brag about their conquests the way nobles used to. It is seen as irreverent for the dead, and something which was a scarring experience that the modern commoner soldier is often not very proud of. It is not seen as a heroic deed, even if they are told they are heroes. They almost never feel like it. Instead, they just feel like killers for the government, and nothing more than that. This class of people, who once had all of the wealth and power in the world, are now just an inbred relic of the past. They are not even noticed by many anymore, and are seen as something that once existed long ago. The world has truly passed them by, and they don't seem fully conscious of it in many cases. And when they are conscious of it, they seem completely resigned to their fate. It is worth noting that the 19th century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche believed that the aristocracy of his day in the 19th century was one that had no hope of continuing or being reborn in some way, under some circumstance, but in fact they were destined to fall, that they were spent and not worth saving. He believed that the only way forward was to forge a new aristocracy, made up of talented commoners who could eventually form their own new hereditary aristocracy, and that when they do this, they would be able to unite Europe. The old dream of Rome would come alive again. The dream that was tried and failed under Charlemagne and the Hohenstaufens in the Holy Roman Empire, as well as the Napoleonic Empire, and most recently under the two German empires of the 20th century. But that one day it will be possible to achieve this. You cannot count the European Union as an example of this. If anything, Europe today is run by a bureaucratic class, not an aristocratic class. And even the German empires of the 20th century were not really aristocratic empires. They were working-class nationalist empires. And that is not the same. Nietzsche's vision could still come true one day. It's almost like some spiritual force is stopping us Westerners from uniting and rebuilding the ancient universal empire. Antiqua Catholicos Imperium. Even though there have been many attempts to do so. It's almost like Europe has to do something first, and then it will be worthy of uniting and achieving its destiny. Like it's not ready, and it cannot achieve its reward of unity without doing this thing first. I believe it is its addiction to rationalistic reductionism and materialism. That is what is stopping it from evolving and uniting. But there is some hope for the contemporary state of the aristocracy, at least in France, because to this day, there are still remnants of the French aristocracy who still believe in themselves, who still believe in their right and ability to rule France, and they believe that they will one day take it back. They are sedevacantists, which means that they don't believe in the current Catholic Church, because they feel it is corrupt, and that it is treacherous because it sided with democracy. And they feel this was a great betrayal of the idea of the divine right of kings, and the right of kings and nobles to rule over the commoners. This group of modern-day nobles were even fighting against social issues in our time. There were 20-year-old French aristocrats who were throwing Molotov cocktails at French police and getting into fights with them while protesting the passing of gay marriage in France when it was legalized. Compare this to American conservatives who didn't bat an eye when it happened in their country, and then almost immediately started accepting transgenderism right after. This shows that the French aristocracy still have some fight left in them, and that they have still stuck by their old values and social and political beliefs, and that they are not changing, and that they still want their country back, and they are still willing to go toe-to-toe with anyone to get their country and their power back. They are still a military elite at heart. They are still warriors. These modern nobles also believe in a form of astrology, which tells them that they will retake their country in approximately 200 years, and that the King of France will rise again to the throne. They say that if the Jews can wait 2,000 years to return to their homeland, then they can wait just a little over 400 years since the fall of the July monarchy during the revolutions of 1848 to retake their throne and their rightful place in European society and French society in particular. Maybe they're right, and maybe it won't just be French aristocrats. Maybe it will be European aristocrats returning to their thrones all across Europe as well. And then maybe the new aristocracy of the West can be integrated into them, and maybe it will even refresh the gene pool of these families, so they will not have so many inbreeding problems. I believe that most of the new aristocracy will come from the commoners who rise up and create it, and then some individuals from the old European aristocratic houses are going to want to be a part of it.